Hello there and welcome to the Double Zero Challenge channel. We do just one thing on this channel, and that's to take these two D10 dice and see how long it takes before we can roll a double zero. Now, if you'd like to play along, please write down your guess now. All I ask is that you don't disclose it in the comments, let other people watch it and discover the result for themselves. There'll be more to explain as we go along, but with odds of 1 in 100, we better get cracking. So, roll number 1. And that is a 9 and a 5. So we're looking for a double zero. That's a 5 and a 2. And that's a 3 and a 7. We have a 7 and a 9. And that's a 7 and a 2. A 7 and a 9. And a 7 and a 2. And that's a 4 and a 5. And we have a 1 and a 5. And that's a 5 and a 7. Oh, we have a 0, but we also have a 9. Just remember it's only double zero we're looking for. If we do encounter any other zeros, any other doubles rather, we'll knock them down. But they're not ultimately what we're after. Next roll. That's a 3 and an 8. And we have a 6 and a 4. And that's a 7 and a 4. 4 and a 3. And that's a 0 but a 9. We have a 2 and a 5. And that is a 9 and a 9. So double 9 there. So we put that on the row at the bottom. And that is a 6 and a 9, so not a double. I know there's a little line, but sometimes my mental rotation lets me down. So I'd just like to make sure, even though we both know it doesn't really matter if it's not a 0. Anyway, moving on. We have a 6 and a 7. And that's a 1 and a 3. That is a 7 and a 9. We have a 0 but a 6. A 7 and a 6. And that's a 9 and a 1. We have a 3 and a 6. And that's a 6 and a 1. A 9 and a 2. And that is a 6 and an 8. A 0 but a 6. And that is a double 5. I'll put that on the bottom there. And a double 7. Put that on the bottom there. Mind that the odds are 1 in 100 for rolling a double zero, so we're kind of on track at the moment. Not that hypothetical odds mean anything in a real world situation. 2 and 4. Oops, a 0 but a 5. If you're a long-term watcher, you'll have gathered there's minimal editing with these things, so if any mistakes like this happen, you will likely see them. That is a 7 and a 1. Any big mistakes and I just hit the big delete button. You never see big mistakes, just little ones. And that is a 2 and a 6. Like the time I started with D20s. I was wondering why it's taking me so long. Double 8 there. Actually, I did start this project with the intent of using D20s, but they simply took too long. The odds are 1 in 400 for that. There were some long sessions, and I'm like, no, we need to cut this. Anyway, 0 but a 2. Was that a 7 or a 1? Or that's a 7, and it's a 2. There we go. I'm going mad, or maybe I'm just a bit tired. It's about 8:30 at night I'm recording this. 5 and 9. And that is a 9 and a 6. 3 and a 2. And that's a 3 and a 7. A 9 and a 7. And that's a 2 and a 6. When we get to 50, we'll do a nice big roll with 2 hands, but we've got a few more to go until we reach that point. So to carry on is a 6 and a 7. And that's a 1 and a 4. We have a 4 and a 1, as opposed to 1 and a 4. That is no, it's not. It's a 9 and it's a 6. And for roll number 50, it's an 8 and a 2. So we carry on for 100 rolls. And that's a 3 and a 5. A 4 and a 5. And we have a 4 and a 2. That's an 8 and a 2. And that's a 4 and a 2. A 6 and a 9. And a 0 but a 3. And that's a 3 and a 6. And that is a double 9. Fifth double of the session. And we have a double 4. Brings us up to 6. Come on, could we do the triple double? And that's a 2 and a 4. So the answer is no. We carry on. A 4 and a 5. And that's a 7 and a 6. An 8 and a 6. 2 and a 5. And a 7 and a 2. And that's a 0 but a 3. And a 1 and a 7. And that's 8 and 3. It's a 0, but it's a 6. An 8 and a 7. And a 2 and a 4. A 7 and a 4. And a double 5. That's a 4 and a 2. And a 2 and a 4. It's a 0 but a 6. And that's a 7 and a 5. It's a 7 and a 3. And it's an 8 and a 2. That's a 0 but a 6. A 0 but a 9. And that is a 6 and a 6. And that is our 8th double of the session. And that's a 9 and a 3. A 0 and a 9. And that's a 2 and a 6. We have an 8 and a 9 there. And that's a 3 and a 9. 1 and 3. And that's a 4 and a 1. A 7 and 9. And it's a 0 but a 7. A 5 and 9. And a 0 but a 5. A 1 and a 3. And we're coming up to 100, so nearly the double hander. But first, a 4 and a 1. And that's a 4 and a 3. Five and a 6. And an 8 and a 3. And the double hander is a 0, but it's a 3. So we continue on for 150 rolls. It's a 0 but a 6. And a 4 and a 9. That is a double 5. Great stuff, our 9th double of the session. A 0 but a 4. And that's a 1 and a 9. A 2 and a 1. And that's a 3 and a 4. A 9 and a 2. A 0 but a 3. And that's a 3 and a 7. That's a 0 but a 3. And a 0 but a 7. And an 8 and a 6. We have a double 2. Sling that on the pile. And a 3 and a 5. That is a 3 and a 9. And that's a 9 and an 8. And we have a 0 but a 6. That's a 4 and a 3. And it's a 0 but a 6. 0 but a 2, and that's a 6 and a 4, an 8 and a 4, and that's a 0 but a 7. Oops, a daisy. 8 and a 1, and that's a 3 and a 2. 6 and a 5, that's a 2 and a 3, and a 0 but an 8. And we have a 6 and a 9, a 5 and a 9, and that's an 8 and a 7. A double 2, making that our 11th double of the session. A 5 and a 3, and that is an 8 and a 9, and a 3 and a 1, and that is a 6 and, yeah, that is a double 6. There we go. Making our 12th double, 6 plus 6, of course. Uh, double 7, but the one double we really want is evading us. But still, on we go, not thinking. That's a 2 and a 5. And we have a 3 and a 5. That's a 0 but a 1. 5 and a 7. And that's an 8 and a 5. That's a 5 and an 8. A 1 and a 7. Just a few more till the double hander. And that's a 3 and a 5. A 8 and a 7. And that's a 6 and a 7. A 3 and a 1. And for 150, it's a 2 and a 9. So we carry on for roll 200. And that's a 1 and a 6. A 3 and a 4. And a 3 and an 8. And that's a 4 and a 7. And that's a 1 and a 7. We have a 3 and a 6. That's a 9 and a 1. A 0 but a 5. And that's a 4 and a 7. A double 6. Shove that on the pile. That's our 14th double. And that's a 5 and a 7. A 3 and an 8. And we have a 0 but a 5. A 0 but a 3. a 7 and a 5, and a 4 and a 6, a 3 and a 1, and that's a double 4, bringing us to our 15th double. So about what we'd expect for 150 rolls. And that's a 3 and a 7. And we have a 5 and a 7. And that's an 8 and a 6. And that's a 2 and a 4. A 0 but a 7. A 6 and a 1. And that's a 5 and a 9. A 7 and a 3. And we have an 8 and a 2. That is a 7 and a 6. A 5 and a 3. And a double 3. Sling that on the pile. A 7 and a 2. And that is a 9 and a 6. Here we have it. And that's a 0 but a 3. We have a 9 and a 2 there. And that's a 9 and a 7. A 2 and a 3. And a 0 but a 9. A double 4. And we have a 4 and a 1. And that's a 9 and a 5. A 9 and a 4. A 7 and a 3. Whoops. 0 but a 4. Again, likes to pop out of that because it makes a lovely sounds, but it also loves to jump out. It's quite smooth on the inside. Anyway, we're approaching 200. We're about to have a double hander in just a moment. But first, 6 and 8. And that's a 0 and a 9. And a 1 and a 9. And that's a double 6. And that's a 9 and a 1. And it's a double 0, one short of 200. Okay, 199 throws to get, what's that, 18 doubles plus that. So about on par for the number of throws, although compared to the hypothetical odds of 1 in 100, we've been waiting quite a long time to get this double 0. So thank you very much for watching. You take care and roll on next time.